Julia, hello there. Good to see you. Red on your dress, red on the screen. How do you think that the 200 held up today, all things considered? I mean, as we've mentioned, the materials, the metals and the miners, doing particularly poorly. We're down by about 0.5%, outperforming most of our regional peers.
We did see a lot more red across the screen in most parts of Asia compared to here in Australia. And I guess it was a day where it was hard to forget that the Aussie share market had hit a fresh 10-year high on Friday. So we are coming off a very high mark. And of course, here being reporting season, watching those reports very much in focus. But, those global trade tensions once again going up a notch because of Turkey and the US. We did see commodities under pressure and the material sector was down by about 1.3%. So, look, it's not good for equities. And I guess the greatest fear is that we are seeing strong global growth at the moment. It's not that we stop seeing that global growth, but it's that global growth starts to slow down. And we've seen that the impact of slowing growth, what it's done in terms of markets like China over the years, as well as different economies. So I guess the market a little bit jittery that perhaps we are seeing peak optimism in terms of earnings and the outlook for the global economy. But look, having said that, on Friday it was much more of a positive session and we did hit that fresh 10-year high on the market. So that's hard to forget as well.
Yeah, okay. You brought up reporting season. Let's go there then, because we will be discussing what's happening on a macro level later this hour. Can we start with JB Hi-Fi? Our business editor, James Dagger-Nixon, had just wrapped a conversation with the CEO of JB Hi-Fi. Let's listen into what he had to say when it comes to Amazon and competition.
We respect all our competitors, and while we run our own race, we're obviously acutely aware of what our competitors do. But at a fundamental level, competition makes you stronger. And JB's always been about being match fit and hitting our challenges head on. So a couple of years ago, we obviously anticipated there'd be a changing competitive landscape. We invested in our website, we invested in what we call delivery choices. As I mentioned earlier, we went from some products having one solution to now 4 solutions. In CBD, if with our stores in the CBD, we can get you something in 3 hours. And that is world's best practice in Australia. So, we worked hard with Toll to bring that to market, and we're really proud of that.
Well, apart from competition, Julia, a big topic of conversation around the JB Hi-Fi result is obviously cost control. JB Hi-Fi really talking up its efforts in that area. Market, though, sending shares lower, down by about 0.4% on a day that some other of the discretionary retailers suffered greater falls. So how do we balance that all up?
Initially, we actually saw a positive performance in its shares, and don't forget that this is the second most shorted stock on the Australian share market. So initially, I suspect we saw a little bit of short covering, and I guess in terms of the result, what we look at is not only the result, but also the outlook to get clues into what might be coming up in the next 12 months. First of all, the result, it came in slightly higher than that revised expectations downward that we saw, and the net profit was up by 35%. That means it was another record result by JB Hi-Fi. It was things like computers, drones, communication devices that really helped the result. And I guess one of the things I was watching very closely was how the home appliances went, given the softness that we've seen in things like house prices over here on the East Coast. And look, there were some challenges in terms of the home appliance, but online sales was interesting. It's now 4.6%, and this is of course the segment of sales which is probably most under threat by the likes of Amazon as well as Kogan. So that internet presence is very important, but also they gave us an update into how July had gone. And in terms of JB Hi-Fi Australia, that was up by 0.3%. Good Guys was up by about 1.4%, and then New Zealand saw the strongest growth. I think it was up by about 3.4%. So compared to the numbers last year, these type of growth numbers are very slow for JB Hi-Fi. So I guess it just represents the challenges that it's going to
answer to that either. I'd just like to move on past JB Hi-Fi, get to BlueScope Steel, because there was a bit of a theme here as well, Julia, with the share price opening at $18.52, hit a high of $18.67, and then pulled back from that. So actually ended up closing down, pretty significantly, actually. BlueScope looks like it will finish off down by 1.5%. So again, what did the market sort of work out through the session? Or was it a victim of, some of these heightened fears around trade and tariffs around the globe?
I actually think this was a really good result. We saw it beating expectations, they increased their buyback, And then they announced that they were also looking at the North Star expansion as well. And just having a look at the different segments, all the upstream segments were up. Australia and New Zealand was the best there. And in terms of the downstream areas, building products, Asia and North America were down, but that was due to margin squeeze, and that was well flagged to the market. Not only that, the guidance that they gave for the first half of this financial year, the current financial year that we're in, of underlying earnings growth of 10%, that's actually ahead of where consensus is, which stands at about 4% growth. So all in all, I think this was a positive update. But look, when you do see the market quite jittery, it does tend to move away from growth more into some of the more defensive areas, and perhaps we could have seen a bit more of a shift as we saw the Turkish lira continuing at those lower record levels during the Asian session. But altogether, I really like this result, Nadine.
All right, we heard from BlueScope CEO a little bit earlier on today as well. Let's hear what he had to say, particularly in relation to the U.S. President Donald Trump and tariffs.
The position that we put to the administration is that for many years now we've exported steel from Australia into our owned facility on the West Coast. We then take that steel and transform it into higher value add products like COLORBOND. So we see ourselves as a manufacturer in North America, and the exports from Australia to our business on the West Coast Steelscape are part of that supply chain.
Just a quick thought on Nufarm. Pretty severe selling today. I believe it is still the worst performer on the 200. Overdone, do you think? There's still a lot of unknowns when it comes to this Monsanto story as it plays out.
Look, it was the Monsanto story which was the key reason behind the fall that we saw. And this was a single person case over in the US. So a gardener who was doing the gardens for a school who got cancer, and he was awarded $295 million US dollars. I guess the problem is, well, what's the alternative to Roundup or glyphosate? And the answer is, like, there is no safe, viable alternative at the moment. So we've had countries debating sort of whether to use it or not, especially the European Union, and they've agreed to extend the use of that over in the EU for another 5 years. But also on top of that, we are seeing agricultural stocks coming under pressure as well. And look, Elders was down 10%, Webster, GrainCorp, they were all down lower as well.
Yeah, tough business. Julia.